Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. We are in the problem of life, beginning with the sentence, "This is what the old wisdom meant."
It's been 1 week, so just to get the continuity, I'll tell you briefly what he has said in the previous para. I won't read the para, I'll just tell you in other words, what he's saying.
Do you make notes on everything?
Yeah.
Excellent. So you can give a quick summation?
Yes, that's right.
Excellent. Yeah.
So he says, from our study up to this point, we can now identify the sources of the problem of life and mind, which are imperfect stages of consciousness and force. The first difficulty is that man is conscious only of a small part of his whole being. He knows only his surface and that too most imperfectly. He is unaware of his subconscious, his subliminal and his superconscious parts. These levels are the major part of his existence and therefore they govern the surface being of body, life and mind, which is only an instrument of the larger part of himself. This is what he has said. So now we read the next para. This is what the old wisdom meant when it said that man imagines himself to be the doer of the work by his free will, but in reality, nature determines all his works and even the wise are compelled to follow their own nature. But since nature is a creative force of consciousness of the being within us, who is masked by his own inverse movement and apparent denial of himself, they called that inverse creative movement of his consciousness the Maya or illusion power of the Lord, and said that all existences are turned as upon a machine through his Maya by the Lord seated within the heart of all existences. It is evident then that only by man so far exceeding mind as to become one in self-awareness with the Lord can he become master of his own being. And since this is not possible in the inconscious or in the subconscious itself, since profit cannot come by plunging down into our depths back towards the inconscient, it can only be by going inward where the Lord is seated and by ascending into that which is still superconscious to us, into the supermind, that this unity can be wholly established. For there, in the higher and divine Maya, is the conscious knowledge in its law and truth of that which works in the subconscious by the lower Maya under the conditions of the denial, which seeks to become the affirmation. For this lower nature works out what is willed and known in that higher nature. The illusion power of the divine knowledge in the world, which creates appearances, is governed by the truth power of the same knowledge which knows the truth behind the appearances and keeps ready for us the affirmation towards which they are working. The partial and apparent man here will find there the perfect and real man, capable of an entire self-aware being by his full unity with that self-existent, who is the omniscient Lord of his own cosmic evolution and procession. Pretty complex.
Some complex terms, yes.
Quite
and
a complex
some new
thing.
terms.
Yes. We must always keep in mind the basic thing that there is a superconscious which is manifesting itself in the world, and this is an inverse movement. And going up is the positive movement, or is the affirmation he is calling it, and that is the negation, the denial, and this is the affirmation. Going back to where you came from, into light, and coming down into manifestation, the denial of Satchidananda. So keep these in mind. Rest should not be very difficult, but there are some complicated passages. Let's see what he says. So, this is what the old wisdom meant. The old wisdom, he is referring obviously to the Gita, because he has given two quotations from the Gita, which we will see. Okay? This is what the old wisdom meant when it said that man imagines himself to be the doer of the work by his free will. Okay? We all feel that whatever I am doing with my free will. But that's totally an illusion. But in reality, nature determines all his works, and even the wise are compelled to follow their own nature. Nature is the body-mind life. So body-mind life is dictating terms to your true being. And you obey, but you think that you are doing it. That's not true. Because when you go out into the self, you realize that you are the immutable, featureless self. And the body-mind life is continuing mechanically its own things. So then you realize that you are not the doer of works. Nature is doing the work. And who is nature? The inconscient, the subconscient, the intraconscient, superconscient, everything is nature. And it is that which is making you do things like a puppet. That you realize that this is you are the non-doer. And that's a big experience in spiritual life. The experience of the self, the Brahmic consciousness.
Why does Sri Aurobindo sometimes speak of nature with a capital N as negative and sometimes as positive?
Yes, that also is there. Paraprakriti and Aparaprakriti, that also is there. Because nature, if you want to, you can speak of it in this way. Nature is actually force. If you go back to Satchidananda, consciousness and force, Sat, Chit, Shakti, Ananda. Sat is the substance, subtlest of substance. He calls it existence also sometimes. He calls it sometimes being. So we have to be very careful as to what is the context.
Yes.
Then consciousness is basically Purusha, and force is Prakriti. So Prakriti at the highest level is not mechanical force. It is conscious force. So that is the higher nature. Sometimes use the word higher nature. When it comes down here, it loses its consciousness and becomes mechanical energy. The river is flowing, the wind is blowing, everything is mechanical. There is no consciousness. That's a lower nature. So nature is twofold. Not in the Sankhya philosophy, but in the Gita as well as Sri Aurobindo philosophy.
So he capitalizes nature here.
Yeah. So we'll see that. Okay, so that's the first thing. Prakritim yanti bhutani nigraha kim karishyati. That's the quotation from the Gita. So everybody follows their own nature. What will nigraha, what will control do? It will do nothing at all. You are subject to your nature. Okay, so but since nature is the creative force of consciousness of the being, again, now the being here is very clearly, he is referring to the substance, the Sat. It is a substance which consciousness is manipulating to create forms through force. Okay? But since nature is the creative force of consciousness of the being within us, who is masked by his own inverse movement and apparent denial of himself. The inverse movement is consciousness becoming unconsciousness, coming down and manifesting. And denial, because consciousness is denying itself and becoming inconscious. Force is also reducing itself. Ananda also is reducing itself and becoming pleasure, pain, indifference here. So that's a denial. So his own inverse movement and apparent denial of himself. Apparent, because behind the unconsciousness there is the lurking secretly is the consciousness. Even in the physical world. Apparent denial of himself. They called that inverse creative movement of his consciousness the Maya or illusion power of the Lord, and said that all existences are turned as upon a machine through his Maya by the Lord seated within the heart of all existences. Another quote from the Gita. Anmol, what's the quote?
Ishvaraha sarvabhutanam jiddeshe arjuna tishtati brahmayan sarvabhutani
Yantra ruda Maya. That's right. So both are from this is the old wisdom that he's talking about. So you understood what he's saying, no? He's saying the divine is seated in the heart of all creatures, making them turn as though on a machine, and the machine is your body, mind, life. Okay? So that's the experience you have when you go to the self. Make your mind silent and go to the self. There is experience. I am not the doer. What am I? I am pure witness. I am pure consciousness, watching my own body, mind, life, doing things mechanically. That which you thought you were doing, now you see the body, mind, life doing on its own. A robot. So, and this power of denial of that consciousness which is becoming lower, and this is the masking. It is masked. Sometimes use that word. Yeah, masked by its own inverse movement. Consciousness is masking itself and becoming unconsciousness, and that is the Maya. The power of Maya to do that.
How do the great ones, Nolinis and such, become totally conscious as the doer?
Oh, that's at a very high level. When you become the doer only when you reach the supramental consciousness, or slightly in the ideal planes of consciousness. As you keep going up, the Gita has got a very fine description of that. First, you are only witness. You are witnessing. And normally in India, the yoga stops there. You are liberated, more than happy. Fine, I am liberated, I am not prisoner of body, mind, life anymore, I go. But you realize that you are not doing. Soul is witness, you merge into the Supreme. But the Gita goes further. It says that you can become not only the witness, but you can also become the jnata, you can become the knower, you become the permission giver. The body, mind, life is going mechanically on its own, but you have permitted it to do. Your soul has permitted it to do whatever it is doing. Getting angry, becoming greedy, getting angry, all these things, you have passively agreed to it. So when you realize that you are the permission giver, you now realize that you can also stop the permission. Then the control starts coming. At that time, slowly, you can become the doer. So from there, you are first the witness, then you become the knower, then you become the supporter, bharta. You become the supporter of your own body, mind, life. Then you also become the bhokta. You start enjoying whatever is doing. And finally, you become the Ishvara, you become the Lord. But that's at the highest level. Otherwise, you're not the Lord. So these are the stages that the Gita describes. And Srimad follows that. So, you are not the Lord. All you can do is to escape from the prison house of body, mind, life and go up. Okay? So this Maya is the power of the divine to create that inverse movement and hide itself. It is evident then that only by man so far exceeding mind as to become one in self-awareness with the Lord can he become master of his own being. There's your answer.
Yeah.
Only when you identify yourself with the Lord, which is at the highest level, then you can become Lord. Okay. Master of his own being. And since this is not possible in the inconscious or in the subconscious itself, he is explaining why. Since profit cannot come by plunging down into our depths back towards the inconscient, it can only be by going inward, where the Lord is seated, and by ascending into that which is still superconscious to us, into the supermind, that this unity can be wholly established. The unity with spirit and matter, body, mind, life with the soul. That unity can be established only there. So you can do that not by going down, but by going into yourself, which he calls the intraconscious. So that's intraconscious. When you go in, the psychic being is there in your intraconscious, and when you touch it, to a certain extent, mastery can come.
So I want to ask you about a dear friend, Jyoti Priya.
Yeah.
You may remember.
Yes.
When she met Ramana Maharshi, he said, you are already a realized being, but you're not aware of it.
That's right. That means we are not conscious of our soul. and the soul is divine. That's what he meant. In fact, in Vedanta, that's what they use. No, I told you last time, you are an actor on the stage. So suppose you are an actor, suppose you love acting and you are playing the part of, let's say, Perseus the Deliverer, okay? You identify yourself fully with that Perseus the Deliverer. That's what man is doing. He is identifying himself with body, mind, life, which is Perseus the Deliverer. As soon as the play ends, he goes back to Narad. He knows that him. So that's it. So it's a sort of pretense, but it is also not a pretense. Because the identification with body, mind, life is purposeful. The actor is purposely identifying himself with the character he is playing. So exactly in the same way, we also identify ourselves perfectly with the body, mind, life. And who is doing this? The divine. He is doing it universally, he is doing it individually. So it's a play that you are, but it's a play in real earnest. Because,
Yes.
because you don't know that you are body, mind, life at this stage. Yes, Anwar.
I find it interesting that he's saying that in order to exceed the mind, even the inward movement is helpful.
Yes. Even the?
Inward movement is profitable for exceeding the mind.
Yes. Yes, of course. Because when you go in, you can assume that you are contacting the psychic being. You need not. You can contact the inner mind, inner vital, inner physical in the intraconscious. But if you go even beyond the inner mind, inner vital, inner physical, you will touch the psychic being. And the psychic being certainly has control over the body, mind, life. It can certainly control. And when that is there, permanently, the contact with the higher is very much easier. Even geographically, if you see, you go in, you are not, it's all continuous. No? There is the subconscious and the inconscient, and as you go in and you go up, it's a closer contact with the superconscious. So it's easier. In fact, when you, in Srimdos Yoga, you have the three movements. The psychicization of the nature, then the spiritualization of the nature, and then finally the supramentalization of the nature. Only then you can have complete control over your body, mind, life. Partial control, psychic can give. But you won't have any knowledge. You will have some knowledge, but not spiritual knowledge. For spiritual knowledge, you have to go up, vertically up into the self. Then you have knowledge.
This will give devotion. The inward movement will give devotion.
Yes. Mostly it is emotion and love for the divine. It's not that you don't get any knowledge. You do get some knowledge, but it's not complete. And in that intraconscious, your knowledge can be incomplete. You can make errors. Srimanta says very clearly. Error is possible. The psychic can never make an error, but you can make an error when you are not identified with the psychic.
One more thing. Here the word Lord is used by going inward where the Lord is seated. Now usually the word for Lord in Sanskrit is Ishvaraha.
Yes.
But the Gita sometimes when it speaks of the psychic entity which enters into the being and goes out of it, it uses the same word, Ishvaraha.
Yes.
So it's basically calling us Ishvara. The Jiva it is calling Ishvara.
You are the Ishvara covered up by these heavy layers of body, mind, life. So the divine is there in you.
So there should be no hesitation in myself thinking of myself as Ishvara.
Not hesitation. You should do it. Not hesitation. You must think of yourself as essentially divine. That's the difference between the Christian religion. They say you are a sinner.
That's very
You are not a sinner. You are divine, covered up with these things which are not part of you, and you can throw them off.
That subtle influence is probably where the hesitation is coming from.
Yes.
There's a new film out called The Two Popes. It's a very interesting film with a great actor, Anthony Hopkins. And in that they say, yes, you can come close to God, but you can never be God.
Yeah, that's a Christian
And that's
concept.
the Christian.
That's a Christian concept. But in the Indian concept, there is only Satchidananda, right from the highest to the lowest. So you are divine. But you are covered up here. Remove the coverings, you go back to your divinity. That's it. There is a truth in the Christian concept also, because it's very interesting. Somebody asked Srimando, Because Mahatma Gandhi was very much influenced by Christianity. And he had said that you can never become the divine, but you can have a relation with the divine. Okay? So someone asked Sri Aurobindo, "Sir, what do you say?" So Sri Aurobindo said, if Mahatma Gandhi meant that with your body, mind, life, you can become the divine, the answer is no. The soul can join itself with the divine and merge into it, you can become the divine. But not with the body, mind, life. That is the answer given. So, when will that body, mind, life also become divine? Only in the supramental transformation. Then it will be possible.
That is the future of the earth.
Yes, that's right. That's the aim towards which it is going. So, we go to the next one. And since this is not possible in the inconscious or the subconscious itself, since profit cannot come by plunging down into our depths back towards the inconscient, it can only be by going inward, where the Lord is seated, and by ascending into that which is still superconscious to us, into the supermind, that this unity can be wholly established. For there, in the higher and divine Maya, there you are. So the divine Maya is higher nature, where nature is not mechanical force, but conscious force. It is a conscious force, para-prakriti. Then, is a conscious knowledge in its law and truth of that which works in the subconscious by the lower Maya. So by that lower Maya is nature, if you want, with a lowercase n. But if you say lowercase n, then it is the individual nature. That's why it has still to be a higher case, the uppercase.
Very good.
Universal nature and individual nature. So when he's talking of universal nature, there also there are two. Higher nature and lower nature. Both can be cap n. So, isn't that which works in the subconscious, lower Maya, under the conditions of the denial. So, what are the conditions of the denial? Inconscience, incapacity, death, and law. These are the conditions of the physical world. So, under the conditions of the denial, the higher Maya has to practice here, so it becomes the lower Maya. It becomes mechanical energy. So, under the condition of denial, which seeks to become the affirmation. So there you are, which is seeking to go up. Because the divine has manifested himself and hidden himself in matter, essentially it is divine, therefore there is an upward push. And the evolution starts with that. There is a very interesting passage further down afterwards where he goes into even more detail. What is this push that is coming up? Okay, it says that consciousness is hiding in matter and there is force. So, force tempts consciousness to enjoy the forms that force is making in matter. And there it's a temptation. So, rise up, get up and see the form that I'm doing. He has got that. It's a very interesting way of explaining. He's saying in matter, force is tempting consciousness which is sleeping. Wake up, I am making forms, why don't you enjoy them? These are not words he has used, but that's the implication. So there is this upward urge because of that.
We have to live a long time. And today I read the latest breakthrough in cellular transformation. Two scientists in London, in England, have discovered by adding a chemical, they can take old cells that are dying and regenerate them and make them young cells. It's the first breakthrough. And they say this will extend life indefinitely.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Because after all, matter also, chemical is matter. And matter is ultimately hiding the hidden divine. So it's got all the potentiality also becoming divine. So this is one aspect of it.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So the denial which seeks to become the affirmation. Affirmation is clear. Denial is coming down and hiding itself in inconscience, and affirmation is going up again into the consciousness. For this lower nature works out what is willed and known in that higher nature. That's it. What is there? It is intention. The intention to come down it's an adventure. It's a play. I am coming down and hiding myself, but I will escape from there and go up again. That's the intention. So that's a Leela, the play. So lower nature is executing the intention of the higher nature. That's what he says. The illusion power is willed and known in that higher nature. The illusion power of the divine knowledge in the world, which creates appearances, is governed by the truth power of the same knowledge, which knows the truth behind the appearances and keeps ready for us the affirmation towards which they are working. So, this sentence is clear. The illusion power of the divine knowledge in the world, which creates appearances. Your body, mind, life, all physical forms are appearances. They are temporary forms. Not a single form in the physical world is ultimately real. Everything is only form. It has a beginning and an end. So that is it. Creates appearances, is governed by the truth power of the same knowledge, which knows the truth behind the appearances and keeps ready for us the affirmation towards which they are working. So behind each physical form is the divine presence. And that is the one that is pushing it up. That's what he says. The partial and apparent man. So, who is the partial and apparent man? When you identify yourself with body, mind, life, you are the partial and apparent man. You don't know that you are the soul. If you know you are the soul, then you are not partial and apparent.
But also calls the natural being in the essence.
Pardon?
What he calls the natural being in the essence.
Yes, natural being. But another thing, even when you go up, your consciousness has gone up, and you have separated yourself from body, mind, life, you are still a partial man. Because you must come back and possess your body, mind, life. That would be the complete man. And that's possible only in the supramental.
You used Sri Aurobindo's typical word called possess.
Yes.
That's body life.
Yes. That's what the ascetic does. The ascetic rejects body, mind, life like old clothes and is very happy and he goes up. But that's not the full man.
And the word for man is the same, Purusha and Purusha. The lower is also called Purusha and the higher is also called Purusha.
Yes. That's right.
So when the ascetic goes up, then he doesn't have to take birth anymore.
In the self, that option is there. But not an experience of the self, a realization of the self. In other words, I have one experience, I remain there for 6 months and then I come down again. It has happened to many in the ashram, okay? But that is not going to give you liberation. It will give you liberation temporarily. But if you are stationed in that permanently, then you have a choice. You can either disappear into the infinite or you can take birth again. That, I think, even in the Gita, I think there is that suggestion is there. Because it speaks of the realized soul living in the physical world as a lotus leaf in water. It's a beautiful image. The lotus leaf in water is in water but never gets wet. You can't wet it. So exactly in the same way, you are living in the physical world, you are not affected by the impurities of the physical world. So that means you are living in the physical world, not escaping like the ascetic. So in the Gita already there is a suggestion of that. And what does he do? Sarva bhuta hite rata. He is engaged in the good of all creatures. That's the work that they do. But the idea of transformation of matter itself and a new race, that's not there in the Gita. It's only hinted at.
And it is interesting that the Gita introduces the higher nature in the 7th chapter. But even in the 18th chapter, it is speaking about the lower nature which is moving you like mechanically.
Yes.
So somehow the knowledge of the Divine Mother, the higher nature is hidden. It is told, but it is never brought out openly in the Gita.
Yes.
It's just hinted.
Is there any mention of Divine Mother as such?
No. It's called Paraprakriti Jiva Bhuta. Etad Yonini Bhutani. She is the womb of all existences, it says.
Yeah.
But the word Mata is not there in the entire Gita. Except he says that
about surrender and
Pitahamasya Jagataha Mata Dhata Pitamaha. He says, I am the mother of the entire world.
Yeah.
That's the only time where the word Mata comes in Gita.
oh, and Krishna says I am also the mother.
Yes, yes, sir. He says, Pitahamasya Jagataha Mata Dhata Pitamaha. I am the grandfather, I am the father, I am the mother, I am everything, he says.
But not the mother specifically.
No.
No, not
No.
like that.
Not the mother specifically. That concept of the mother is there in Vedanta. It is not that it is not there. There are some scriptures.
Yes.
I have read one scripture where the sages are saying, you want the ultimate knowledge? Worship the Divine Mother, Shakti. She is the one who will deliver you. She is the one who will do everything.
It's even there in the major Upanishads. Uma Hainavati is there in the Kena Upanishad, in the
Yes.
Katha Upanishad, Aditya Devana Mato.
Yeah.
Even in the Vedas, the Aditi aspect is very strong.
Exactly.
Yes.
Very
The feminine aspect of the divine is there in the Indian tradition, very clearly. So, I'm reading the last sentence. The partial and apparent man here will find there the perfect and real man, capable of an entirely self-aware being by his full unity with this self-existent, not the word self-existent, okay, who is the omniscient Lord of his own cosmic evolution and procession. So, that's it. In the Gita, it's the Purushottama. In Srivnu, it would be the Supermind. Srivnu used the word Ishvara for as an equivalent. He used the word Ishvara.
For what?
For Purushottama, he used the word Ishvara. So, we go to the second.
Yes.
So, the first difficulty he told you, you remember what he told you? Is ignorance, I think. Yeah. Ignorance. The first difficulty of matter, the problem of life. No? The first difficulty is ignorance. Now we come to the second difficulty. The second difficulty is that man is separated in his mind, his life, his body from the universal, and therefore, even as he does not know himself, is equally and even more incapable of knowing his fellow creatures. He forms by inferences, theories, observations, and a certain imperfect capacity of sympathy, a rough mental construction about them. But this is not knowledge. Knowledge can only come by conscious identity, for that is the only true knowledge, existence aware of itself. We know what we are so far as we are consciously aware of ourselves. The rest is hidden. So also, we can come really to know that with which we become one in our consciousness, but only so far as we can become one with it. If the means of knowledge are indirect and imperfect, the knowledge attained will also be indirect and imperfect. It will enable us to work out with a certain precarious clumsiness, but still perfectly enough from our mental standpoint, certain limited practical aims, necessities, conveniences, a certain imperfect and insecure harmony of our relations with that which we know. But only by a conscious unity with it can we arrive at a perfect relation. Therefore, we must arrive at a conscious unity with our fellow beings, and not merely at the sympathy created by love or the understanding created by mental knowledge, which will always be the knowledge of the superficial existence and therefore imperfect in itself and subject to denial and frustration by the uprush of the unknown and unmastered from the subconscious or the subliminal in them and us. But this conscious oneness can only be established by entering into that in which we are one with them, the universal. And the fullness of the universal exists consciently only in that which is superconscient to us, in the supermind. For here, in our normal being, the greater part of it is subconscient, and therefore in this normal poise of mind, life and body, it cannot be possessed. The lower conscious nature is bound down to ego in all its activities, chained triply to the stake of differentiated individuality. The supermind alone commands unity in diversity. So, if you want to become master, you have to go right up to the supermind. Rather discouraging picture. But still, they open the way. Okay. So, there are some interesting things which here, the language, we'll look at the language, it's interesting. The second difficulty is that man is separated in his being, in his mind, his life and body from the universal. And therefore, even as he does not know himself, is equally and even more incapable of knowing his fellow creatures. So, fellow creatures are in the universe, so I don't know the universe, therefore I don't know any of you. Okay, that's what he's saying. Now, he's separated from the universal. My body is part of the universal, yet it does not realize that it is universal matter. My vital is part of universal vital plane of consciousness, but does not realize that it is one with it. Same with the mind. Only when you go to the self, somewhat this knowledge starts coming. You start seeing the oneness of things. So, even as it does not know his fellow creatures, he forms by inferences, theories, observations, and a certain imperfect capacity of sympathy, a rough mental construction about them. But this is not knowledge. Practical knowledge you can get, but it's not knowledge. Knowledge is know what is fully. Okay, then knowledge can only come by conscious identity, for that is the only true knowledge, existence aware of itself. We know what we are so far as we are consciously aware of ourselves. The rest is hidden. So also we can come really to know that with which we become one in our consciousness. But only so far as we can become one with it. Total identification, then you know, otherwise you don't know.
So I want to ask you about the intuitive plane. How does that knowledge differ from this knowledge? Because one has an immediate knowledge in the intuitive plane.
So what he is talking about here is the universalization of yourself. Okay. So when you make your mind silent, there are 4 planes which you call the ideal planes. The higher mind, the illumined mind, the intuitive mind, and then the overmind. And above that is the... So even when you are in the higher mind, intuition can percolate into it. Even when you are in the lower mind, intuition can percolate into it, but you will think it to be a thought. I give you 2 examples. Okay? It's sure that Einstein, his theory of relativity, he worked out with intuition. There's no doubt about it. His mind cannot think of that. Suddenly the idea comes into his head and he develops it as an idea. But actually it's an intuition. The second example very clearly is our mathematician, the Ramanujam, who could not prove his theorems. Hardy was going on telling him, for God's sake, use logic. He says, no, I can't use logic. I know that it's the truth. How do you know it's the truth? My goddess is revealing to me. It's coming directly from there. And now they have proved 3,000 theorems.
Yes.
They're all correct. They can be proved. But he couldn't prove them. So that's intuition. So intuition can come even at the lower level. You can get bits and pieces of it. But if you are in the intuitive plane of consciousness, wonderful. Then everything is open knowledge, because intuition, identification is possible, full identification. At the higher mind level, knowledge is acquired usually by, not by thought, but by light and sight. At the higher mind level. You go to the intuitive mind level, light becomes the means of knowledge.
So, not mantric poetry, but good poetry, fine poetry. Does it come from the intuitive plane or?
It can come from any of these planes.
Any of them.
In fact, there's a book called Overhead Poetry, which is written by Amal Kiran.
Yes.
And Sri Aurobindo is described there. It can come from the psychic, it can come from the inner vital, it can come from the inner mind, it can come from higher planes of consciousness.
Okay.
He has described that. And depending on the vibrational quality of the poem, Sri Aurobindo can identify its source. The vibrational quality will tell you from where it is coming. Because all these have different vibrational qualities.
Mozart's piano compositions, I read somewhere, I can't say where, came from the illumined mind. Some of them. So, that is true.
Yeah. So they can come into the human mind also. In fact, it is all the time coming, but we are not conscious of it. Intuition can come all the time. Okay, so where are we? Yeah. But so far it's going 1 minute. If the means of knowledge are indirect and imperfect, the knowledge attained will also be indirect and imperfect. What he means by indirect is through the senses. Between the object and the subject, there is something in between. And that's the senses. My senses are coming between you and me. I can know you only through my senses. But if I go to the higher mind level, I don't need my senses. I can use these subtle senses. So then we have these 4 methods of knowledge which Sri Aurobindo discusses in the Life Divine. It's not here. But the first means of knowledge is through the senses. He calls that separative, indirect knowledge. I know you, you are separate from me, and I know you, but indirectly through my senses. The second knowledge is, I can know you, you are still separate, but I can use not direct knowledge, because I don't need my senses. I can use my subtle senses. Nothing in between you and me. So I can see your thoughts, but they are your thoughts, not mine. So that's the second degree of knowledge. Okay? Direct separative knowledge. That's the second. The third is direct non-separative identification. And there are 2 grades. There is a lower grade and a higher grade. So these are the 4 types of knowledge that you can have. So your question about the intuition, where you are in the intuition, direct non-separative knowledge. You become what you want to know. But that power can percolate right down into your mind also, even at this level. You have written so much poetry. From where is it coming? Did you ask Mother?
Mother was already gone.
So, in fact, Sri Aurobindo identifies Ramakrishna's images, which he used to give for spiritual life. He says they are all coming from the intuitive plane of consciousness. Yeah. He used to give beautiful examples. No? So, those examples are all coming from the intuitive plane of consciousness. So, we read the next sentence. Is the next one? It will enable us to work out with a certain precarious clumsiness. Look at the words. Precarious clumsiness. Okay? But still, perfectly enough from our mental standpoint, certain limited practical aims, necessities, conveniences, a certain imperfect and insecure harmony of our relations with that which we know. So, if I have to deal with you, for practical purposes, it's enough. That's what he's saying. But still it is, the word used is very interesting. Yeah. Precarious clumsiness. Precarious because it can immediately change also, and clumsy is not the real thing. So, for practical purposes, it will do, he's saying. Okay? Then, a certain imperfect and insecure harmony of our relations with that which we know. But only by a conscious unity with it can we arrive at a perfect relation. If I want to have a perfect relation with you, I must become you. And I know what you are, and then it can be a perfect relation. Yeah. Therefore, we must arrive at a conscious unity with our fellow beings, and not merely at the sympathy created by love or the understanding created by mental knowledge, which will always be the knowledge of their superficial existence and therefore imperfect in itself and subject to denial and frustration by the uprush of the unknown and unmastered from the subconscious or the subliminal in us and in them and us. So
that's a very strong statement.
Yeah. So that's right. So he's saying it can come from wherever it is, but it will be a very, it can always be disturbed. This knowledge that we have can always be disturbed. Today I am friendly with you, tomorrow it may change completely. I may become your enemy even.
But he uses the word sympathy created by love.
Yes. This is something that he has explained about the French, the idea of the French Revolution. Égalité, fraternité, and liberté. Okay, so he says, fraternity cannot come by sympathy and human love. It's imperfect. It can come only when you identify yourself and go to the higher level. Then you realize that I am one with everybody. That is true fraternity. So at a mental level, fraternity can never come. You have to go to the higher level, he says. He has mentioned this about the three ideals of the French Revolution. That's what he means by the sympathy, created by sympathy. It is better than not to have sympathy, but it's still imperfect. But this conscious oneness can only be established by entering into that in which we are one with them, the universal. And the fullness of the universal exists constantly only in that which is superconscient to us, in the supermind. I think he is using the word supermind here in a very loose and relaxed manner. I don't think he's meaning absolutely the supermind, because even when you go to the higher mind level, you can have a cosmic consciousness and you can feel one with everybody else also. So he is using the word here in the sense of supermind, above the mind.
And he's saying that the fullness of the universe.
Fullness, yes.
No, so that's why he means supermind.
Yes.
He's meaning supermind only because he's saying if you want to have the fullness of the universe,
that's right.
then you need to.
Yeah, I missed that word. Fullness, if you want, you have to go only to the supermind. But partially you can have even below.
And consciently.
Yes, very interesting word.
Yeah,
I was wondering about that.
Very interesting word.
Yeah, not consciously, but consciently.
Yes.
What's the difference? I wonder. Consciently?
Maybe full awareness.
Consciently,
maybe full awareness.
Conscient and conscious. I think so.
Conscious is only, colloquially speaking, it's only used in the mind level.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Conscient has a...
Yes, that's right. That's what Narad is saying.
The conscient, it's a plane of consciousness. It's only as an adverb here, it seems to be meaning more than just the individual.
Yeah, that's right. Conscious refers morely to the mind.
Yeah.
That's right.
And more than individual, right?
Yes, more than.
Yeah. So, consciently only that which is superconscient was in the supermind. For here in our normal being, the greater part of it is subconscient. And therefore, in this normal poise of mind, life and body, it cannot be possessed. You cannot have the real knowledge of anybody else because you are not one with them. The unity with others can come only in the superconscious and not in the inconscient or the normal activity. The lower conscious nature is body-mind life, is bound down to ego in all its activities, chained triply to the stake of differentiated individuality. This triple chain is sattva, rajas, tamas, the body, mind and life. They are the principles of the body, mind, life. Sattva, rajas, sattva belongs to the mind, tamas belongs to the body, and rajas belongs to the vital. So this is a chain, triple chain. Yeah, the triple chain is referred to in many scriptures also, and the concept coming from the Sankhya philosophy. So when he's saying triply chained, you are chained to body, you are chained to vital, you are chained to mind. You are chained. Ramakrishna is a very interesting thing. He says the body chain is made of iron. The vital chain is made of silver. The mind chain is better stuff. It is gold chain, but it's a chain.
And in Savitri, he uses the triple cord of mind.
Yes. That's a different one.
That's
the triple cord of mind is the physical mind, the vital mind, and the pure mind.
Oh.
Yeah, there also there are three minds. That's right. So, yeah, the last sentence is, the supermind alone commands unity in diversity. So, what does that mean? I am conscious of my individuality, but I am one with everybody else. I am conscious of my individuality, but I am one with everybody else. Unity in diversity.
It's magnificent.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
That's it.
Thank you, Ranga.